Okay, so we have two types of environments. The micro and macro environmental forces. Okay, the macro environmental forces include the 6 factors: demographic, economic, natural, technological, political and social environments, and also cultural environments. Okay. Now, just on the demographic environments, I would like to highlight that this concept is, this demographic environment is actually not the same as demographic segmentation variable that we are going to discuss when it comes to strategic marketing topic in the next session. Okay. The purpose of them understanding demographic environment is actually to investigate the changes in the human population. In terms of what? In terms of its size, density, the location, whether people have been moving around. In Australia, for instance, we know that people have been moving from New South Wales to Queensland and so on and so forth. Okay. The changes in terms of age, for instance, we understand that there are some highlights of the Australian population from age perspective. Experts would normally use the term aging population, and that has some implication to some businesses. Okay, so in brief, that's demographic environment, and economic is basically about any factors that affect the consumer's purchase power and their spending patterns. Okay, now here we talk about specific factors such as the GDP, for instance. Okay, the inflation rate, the income of the of certain population, for instance. Okay, the unemployment rate, which is another one. Okay, another indicator, another economic indicator that we also need to look at from marketing perspective. Okay, and we can also look at the consumer sentiment, for instance, where the consumer sentiment or consumer's confidence, for instance. All right, to help us understanding the level of purchase or spending pattern of the consumers, right? You may recall that back in 2008, 2009, when the global financial crisis happened, well, arguably, especially the politicians, they argue that now it didn't happen in Australia because our GDP still grew at a time by 0.5%, and I like that term. Actually, I like that comment that I read on the news, basically. Well, but that affects the news. At least the news of global financial crisis arrived in Australia, and that affects consumer spending pattern. Right, a lot of consumers at that time, delay purchasing big ticket items, for instance. So they delay that because they're not confident. They're not confident whether they could claim back their lifestyle, for instance. They're not confident. Consumers not confident whether they can retain their lifestyle. Right? How do consumers retain their lifestyle? Well, that's related to the jobs. Right? If we normally go to the pub every week, for instance, that's our lifestyle. To retain the lifestyle, we need the stability, income stability to do that. Okay. And the next one is the natural factor, which is basically related to the natural resources. And the important element about the natural resources includes the energy, for instance. We know that a lot of businesses depend on the fossil fuel type of energy, and unfortunately, it is not replenishable. And we know that if they have become less and less because we've been using them, then the cost will go up. That may affect the cost of running business. Okay. And well, we also know that if you look at the petrol prices recently in Australia, that has gone up to around $1.50 roughly, and sometimes it goes up to $1.70 basically compared to last year. All right. So in terms of natural resources, one of the main issues in here is the scarcity of the resources, and some of them are not replenishable. The other issue in terms of natural factor is about the pollution. And there is a strong call for organization to manage the pollution, to help to contribute to the environment as well. Now we are going to discuss that when it comes to sustainable marketing in Module 6. Okay. Technological environment that helps us to create new technologies, new products, processes, and also opens new marketing opportunities. The big highlight from technological environment is the use of digital technologies. That has changed a lot the business landscape. In today's business landscape, consumers have benefited from using the digital technologies, and marketers have also used it to help them reaching customers and creating new opportunities. Okay, and the next one is political and social environment, which is basically about the law or the government agencies that create the law. People may argue that people may analyze the government stability, whether it, when it comes to government stability, whether the government, the changes of government does not mean bloodshed, for instance, but government stability does not include that aspect only. It may also include how often do we change the government, right? You may recall that between 2007 and 2013, we changed prime minister very often in Australia. So people joke that, well, we changed the prime minister like we changed Andes at the time, actually. So we had Kevin Rudd, we had Gillard, we had Rudd again, and then we had Abbott, and so on and so forth, right? And that actually has signaled wrong message to the business people, actually. Business people at that time argue that, well, the risk of running business in Australia is higher than running business in developing economies, actually, because of the changing government. Why is that? Because the changes of government, the new government may lead to new policies that may not be friendly to the business operations, right? It's hard for the business to predict, which is basically giving them headache, giving the business people headache. Okay. Pressure group. Well, that's also related to the public opinion at some point of time. The public that we discussed before. The environment issues have become, one of the things that pressure groups have been talking about, and they give pressures to the government. At some point of time, the government may issue the new legislation. Okay, that may escalate the cost of running business because we need to comply with the legislation. Okay. The next one is culture environment, which is basically about the values that affect our consumers and the way they view themselves, the basic values, the perceptions, their preferences, and behaviors as well. One of the big highlights in here is basically about the in developed countries like Australia, we noticed that people have become more and more mobile, basically. We leave home in the morning and we actually bring our mobile gadgets, basically. So that's part of the value that may also affect the way we communicate one to another. Okay, so there's some highlights, and I think I have a bit more in here. So if you look at the demographic profile, for instance, we have the changing age structure of the population. We have the baby boomers, Generation X, and millennials, the Generation Y, and people now talk about Generation Z, basically. Those who are born after year 2000. Well, they have different characteristics, and some marketers use generational marketing as their basis of target market to form their target market strategies. Look, if you do that, I would recommend you to look at the generations more thoroughly, so you are not going to be trapped into the stereotype. Because there is a stereotype that, for instance, the baby boomers probably are not familiar with the digital technologies. Well, probably not really. In your product category, they may be familiar with digital technologies, for instance. Okay, so we need to look at it more carefully. And on the other hand, the millennials, we understand that they're quite good in using digital technologies. They do not only use it as part of the doing things, but it is part of their way of life, using digital technologies, right? So they are so digital, they use virtual communication pretty well, basically. So there's some highlights of these two generations. The other thing about the demographic highlights is basically we talk about the geographic shift in population. We also expect a better educated, more white collar in markets like Australia, more professional population. That will bring impact to from marketing perspective. Okay. If we have a better educated, more white collar, more professional population, we expect that our customers will become more and more demanding. Okay, so that is the implication, and eventually that will that may escalate the cost of creating the offering. Okay, hang on a second. Yep, this one. Oh, okay. I actually have uploaded the slides that I present. All slides I present, I would upload them to the discussion forum. Yeah. So yeah, sorry if I was too fast. Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Right, so we expect our customers to be more demanding because our population has become a better, educated, and we have more white collar as well and more professional population, and that's the implication of running business in today's business landscape in Australia. And we also noticed that there is we also notice an increasing trend of diversity, right? We have more diverse and customer background, right? Well, when it comes to, okay, let's look at the diversity in here. Well, diversity, yeah, we know that it is about different background, but the term different background in here is actually quite broad. It's not only about different ethnic background or different language spoken at home, not only about that, but it also includes the term, for instance, sexual orientation, like the LGBT group, for instance. That's part of the that's part of the color of our customers now. That also includes the different political orientation and so on and so forth. Okay, so what does it mean if our customers have become more diverse? Well, look, there is an implication in here that we also need to consider. More a fragmented need, right? The customers need may become more and more complicated in here. There is a great deal of complexity in terms of differences to service the customer. In Sydney, for instance, we have a group of customers that adopt certain religion that don't eat pork, for instance, so they need halal food. And McDonald's is in Bankstown area, for instance, the McDonald's outlet offers halal food because people don't eat pork and and stuff like that because of the religion that this group adopts. So so that is one of the implications as well in terms of increasing diversity. Right, economic environment, we discussed that, and just want to show a bit of the example here that I just want to discuss a bit of example here. Right, so this is our weekly average, weekly wages, the average of weekly average. Okay, guys, when it comes to analyzing macro environmental forces in particular, there are a couple of things I'd like to highlight to you. First, we need to show the changes, and second, we need to show the impact. Okay, and the impact of macro environmental forces revolves around positive impact or negative impact only. Positive only, I just need to highlight that because some people say positive and negative. Well, if you say that the impact is positive and negative, there are two possibilities in here. Whether we haven't done enough research or there is no impact. Okay, so positive only or negative only, you need to select which one they are. It can't be neutral. Okay, and from the mentioned perspective, the impact of our analysis revolves around costs, increase or decrease, that lead to profit, increase or decrease, decrease or increase. Okay, the second one is consumption, increase or decrease, that leads to the revenue of the business. Okay, so in some cases it may also affect both cost and consumption. Okay, so let's say we have a diagram here, right? The weekly average, the average weekly wages of our Australian consumers. Okay, if we look at that, well, that shows a positive trend. That shows an increasing trend. Okay, so what does it mean? Well, if the consumers' wages are in growing trend like this, that means their purchase power is getting stronger, right? If their purchase power is getting stronger, then the consumption is likely to increase, or at least it is sending a positive trend to the consumption that leads to the revenue. Okay, so that's hopefully that gives us a bit of example in terms of using data like this to support our argument to when it comes to analyzing macro environmental forces. Okay, right. So that's economic. And natural, we discussed about the main issues in terms of natural environment, whether it is increasing, it is about pollution or shortage of raw materials, such as the fossil fuel energy that may become more and more, an issue for us. Okay, and we also expect at some point of time there is an increase of government intervention in the natural resources management. Okay, political and social environment. We also discussed about the legislation and changing government agency, for instance, and everything that we just discussed before. You can consider using PAST model, okay, or PASTEL or STEP or STEP. They are the same thing. So we discussed 6 factors before. You can use PAST or PASTEL or STEP or STEP. They are the same thing. Okay, either the 6 factors that we use that we just discussed before, or these factors, they are the same thing, right? Other one that you use is fine. Okay, so and this one here actually shows a brief summary of factors under PAST. Okay, either use PAST or STEP or STEP. They are the same thing again. Well, do we have to analyze everything here? No, you don't. Okay, please focus on the big drivers. What are the driving forces in your industry, right? From political perspective, for instance, you may find 2-3 factors here, and 2-3 factors in economic, 2-3 factors in social, and 2-3 factors in technological, right? So when do we say that we have done enough research, we have done enough analysis of past forces? When you have strong positive impact and strong negative impact, okay? Because the strong positive impact basically goes to opportunities analysis in our SWOT analysis later on, okay? And the strong negative impact goes to threat analysis in our SWOT analysis, okay? So with that, we actually link the organization's capability reflected by strengths and weaknesses and the environmental forces, okay? So that's when we say enough. Okay, I've done that. I've analyzed these 2 factors here, these 2 factors there, 3 factors here, and so on and so forth. And they are a set of opportunities, and they are big opportunities. They are strong positive impact. Okay, and these guys here are the strong negative impact. That's when we can claim, yes, we have done enough analysis. Okay. Okay, so you can use that. You can select any factors again. Again, I'm not expecting you analyze these laundry list, basic or shopping list. It is not the purpose of doing the past analysis. You just need to pick up the strong ones. Okay, strong negative ones, strong positive ones. Okay. Again, this is the one that we just discussed before in terms of past or macro environmental analysis. That's the purpose. Okay, to analyze that, to analyze these factors. And the outcomes, the expected outcome when we conduct past analysis. Okay. Right. Any questions, guys, before we move on to the next one?
I've got a question.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Eddie, our business over here, the chocolate business, would be a hypothetical business, as you said, right?
Yep.
You would be creating a name. If I can't recall if there was a name in the. Yeah, so we'll give it a name, we'll give it a size for the business, and we'll create everything hypothetical, but then the micro and the macro environment is the actual business, the market. So we wouldn't be using that. So we would be using the micro and the macro environment that is already there, but then our company would be hypothetical, correct?
Yes, you are correct. Okay, and what's your question?
Yes, my question would be the pestle would be the pestle analysis of our business, the hypothetical business, right?
Okay. Look, environmental forces, all right, regardless they're micro or macro, well, micro to a certain degree, like the organization, the market organization, yes, it is affected by the fact that it is a fictitious company. But the other factors, right, especially macro environmental forces, regardless your company exists or not, these factors exist.
Correct.
Makes sense or not?
Yeah.
So you can't argue that you are going to analyze hypothetical pestle analysis, because like now, for instance, the LB company doesn't exist, but the political factor, the Australian government, for instance, the Australian legislation, for instance, the average weekly wages, for instance, they exist already.
Exactly, correct.
All right, they exist already. Their competitors also exist already. All right, so regardless the company exists or not, most of the environmental forces basically exist. Yeah, does it answer your question?
Perfect, perfectly. It does. Thank you so much.
All right, okay. Right, now let's move on. All right, so to date we have discussed the okay, yeah, that's one that we are going to discuss actually, the SWOT analysis. Now, look, in terms of SWOT analysis, we know that well, I'm not going to say that it is strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats, but it is actually a combination between strength, between internal aspect of the business, the internal environment of the business, and also the external environment. Therefore, scholars also suggest that the SWOT analysis is actually a strategic fit analysis of the organization, whether they can capitalize on their own capabilities to manage the external challenges, the challenges from the external environment. Okay, so we discussed before that the opportunities and threats are from the environments. You can look at favorable pestle analysis, for instance, favorable past analysis here, okay, for your opportunity analysis. And for your threats analysis, you can look at unfavorable past plus your competitors, either current competitors or future competitors. Okay. Well, actually, the SWOT analysis, when it comes to analyzing opportunities and threats, it is also a good checklist for us. We may analyze pasts in the environmental analysis, and then when we populate together in the SWOT analysis, we may come up, hey, hang on a second, I think this is an opportunity, but I did not have that analysis in the pestle analysis. Then you need to go back up there. You need to go back to your environmental analysis, because it is a big message from opportunity perspective that we have not analyzed. Okay, so that's basically the opportunities and threats. Now, strengths and weaknesses, they are actually internal parts. In other words, they are related to the asset of the organization. the asset, the resource of the organization, or the capability of the organization. Okay. Well, specifically, they revolve around people. It revolves around people, process, and the other organizational attributes, such as the culture of the organization, and so on and so forth. Right. That's basically strengths and weaknesses in a nutshell. And what are they specifically? Well, look, you can look at assets of the organization that revolve around brand, their brand, for instance, or their customers, for instance. Okay, the customer relationship. If they are good in managing the customer relationship, then it is fantastic for them to. It is a fantastic asset for them to capitalize when they launch new product. For instance, they can convince the customers easily. Okay. And the other thing that you can also consider is access to suppliers, for instance. Okay, access to suppliers help us to maintain our promise, to keep our promise for the customers, right? To deliver what we have promised for the customers. Financial resources is another one. Okay, financial resource is another one. The human resource is a big one as well, or talents of the organization. Business process, like new product development, for instance, new product development process, or delivery process, or logistical process. You may recall that some businesses, like in retail, for instance, depends on, you know, how good they are in managing the logistical aspect of the business to manage the cost, because retail industry is in a very tough competition. Okay, so there's some sources of assets that we can consider when it comes to analyzing the brand, analyzing our strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so now this is the area, when it comes to your assessment, this is the area that you can make a reasonable judgment about the Donald B company. Yeah, look, you can make that. I just got a question here from Dan. Would we just make up the internal strengths and weaknesses for Donald B? Well, make a reasonable judgment based on the case. Now, when I say reasonable judgments, you can look at Donald B. A company that is based in Melbourne. They have 2 outlets, okay, basically, and from there you can make, you know, a reasonable call whether it is a large company or small company. Okay, they've been in business or in chocolate product for some time. So based on that, if you want to take this company competing with the guys in chocolate bar industry, such as Cadbury, for instance, which is the market leader, you can make your own judgment whether these guys is comparable or small or medium-sized type of company. From there, you make your own call for their own assets. Okay. Definitely, if you take that business to chocolate bar industry, for instance, they are not in chocolate bar industry yet, so it is safe for us to say that well, they have challenge in terms of brand equity. Okay, in that industry, but they still need to build their expertise in that chocolate bar industry because they are not in there yet. Okay, so that's I guess that's hopefully that gives you a bit of illustration. Okay. Does it answer your question, Dan?
Yes, thank you.
All right, brilliant. Right, so that's the strengths and weaknesses. SWOT analysis. Look, make sure that we know whether we want to put something under opportunity or strength, because I noticed that a lot of people are confused between strength and opportunities, for instance, and weakness and threat. Okay, look, you need to look at whether it is positive or not. If it is positive, then it is either strength or opportunity, then you need to judge whether it is internal or external. Okay, the main point when it comes to judging internal or external is basically whether you can control it or not. If it is within your control, like building your own brand, then it is your internal thing. Okay. Right. So, okay, I have another message here. Any questions?
Eddie, I've got a quick question. You've mentioned that Donald B, the hypothetical company, is not yet in the chocolate bar industry.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding was that they are a chocolate product maker, so that they would be producing chocolate bars, unless I've misunderstood.
Right. Okay. Okay. I can see that's actual. I can see your comments. Look, if you look at that, they are chocolate product maker and they have 2 outlets in Melbourne. So you can also argue that that this company is actually in specialty store, in specialty chocolate category, like Oliver Brown, for instance, or Darrell Lee.